Can show him.
Oh, hello everyone. Yeah, I can see you. No, it's cutting up for some reason. Okay. I have no idea where Adam's going. It's the mystery of the age. Oh, someone's posted in chat. So, Mark, we'll see you on Friday. So, Fabienne, we'll see you on Friday.
My passport is valid. I had to check this morning because sometimes, they want the passport to be like 6 months ahead or something.
Right.
But here, I think it's just the duration of the trip, so no stress.
Oh yeah, well, that's good. Otherwise, we'd have to take you in as a political asylum seeker.
Yeah, well, let's not try even.
Let's not even talk about that. Right. I had a brief meeting with Dina yesterday. Oh, here she is. Fantastic. Hey, Dina.
Good morning.
Look at my cool
Glad you're
background. It's like
there.
interactive 3D. Look, if I do this, it'll manage to be annoying in a completely different way.
I hear your birthday. Is today maybe? Adam, your birthday? Yes? When's your
I didn't
birthday?
tell you any such thing about what's happening on Friday, no. Didn't tell you anything about Friday.
And Foda's birthday's this weekend too. So happy birthday, everybody.
Dini, that is top secret government level. Oh, for crying out loud.
You asked me how my lab functions, and I told you that we do lots of real personal things to celebrate each other, and this is one of them. I'm bringing it to our lab here. The humanizing part of working with human beings.
To be
Happy
honest,
birthday.
To be honest, I'm just glad you're wearing so much color today, literally brightening the room. Yeah, I just as you came in, I just mentioned that we went through a kind of a scenario thing together yesterday. So I forgot to do a agenda for today because this guy here arrived at 8 this morning. But what we do have to cover today, unless there are any other announcements, is Fabienne would like to do some demonstrations. We'd like to go through that scenario that Dina now has, and then it's Andrew time, of course. So yeah, it's exciting. What should we start with, Dini? I'll make an agenda right now, at least so we have something. I apologize again.
I like the birthday cakes falling all over my chat. Thank you, Fabienne.
That's all. Yeah. That's not necessary today.
Meanwhile, can't Dini tell about your meeting?
Yeah, I'm going to post this right now, actually.
So my lab has about how many people do we have right now, Andrew? About 7, 8? Yeah, so we have 7 or 8 people that meet, and we're on Wednesdays we meet in person in the lab, which is nice, most of us. But a lot of our folks live out of town, so they come in from out of the area. But we meet, we talk about like, how was your weekend? How's your kids? We know the names of each other's kids and cats and dogs. And Andrew and I and James are going to an event where they're helping me with an exhibition in Victoria, BC in a week and a half. So we travel together. Anyway, I think we're kind of close in a professional way.
Just as you said that, Adam for some reason disappeared. So there you go.
But I
Hopefully
think
not.
at the heart of us, it's so interesting. We're all kind of geeky, nerdy. I'm probably the most outgoing one. Maybe Holly and I are the most outgoing. You think, Andrew? Yeah. But yeah, it's a much more it's a different environment than this one. I think we're I don't know.
Well, it
We've been
doesn't
together
help
a long time. That's all I
it,
can say.
it doesn't help being so virtual. I do agree with that strongly. So we're going to try to organize another summer social. So who can come to that will be great. And of course, there's September and October, November, I mean.
November. November.
So I put together an agenda. I went to great lengths. So the link is there. Uh, And the first I just wanted to mention really briefly the reader is supposed to be finished today, and we've done the semantic highlighting. It works. Now it's the semantic view that we should get. Yeah.
Are you going to submit a paper, or have you decided that my paper is the only one?
No, I am going to submit a paper. I just had other things. I'll get something done in the next few days. I mean, I
Okay.
have it, but I'll get it in a form where I can share it, and
Okay.
we can put things in there.
All right. Thanks.
I'm still student material, meaning last minute, please. So yeah, I apologize. I don't want to cause any stress, but the discussions we've had recently on what things are in the space, I find really relevant to that. So hopefully we will get a stage longer with that today to the point where it's easier to finish the write-to bit. Right, so what I was saying about reader is you can now, in the test version, press G for great, I for interesting, things like this that have semantic meaning. It'll assign a color to that text. So Mark, this should have made it easier when you went through my thesis, for instance, because some of them are language or grammar. So you don't have to explain every time what the issue is, explain sometimes. The second thing they're trying to do now is when you're in the outline view, you should be able to see all the annotated text in that outline view, or only specific annotated text, such as everything that is important, nothing else. So that carries over to the kind of logic we're thinking about. That's why I wanted to mention. And Andrew, please start talking about the oh yeah, anybody else have any other announcements? Other than what
Well, you
you
got a
announced
fun party
about
this weekend. Who's all coming in besides Adam? It's going to be Fabienne, Mark,
and Leon.
and Leon. Okay.
I can only make it up for Friday, but yeah.
Yeah, you're planning to drive to Wimbledon and train with us in, right?
I'll train up to Wimbledon and then I'll train back, which I think is
Okay.
easy.
All right.
Oh, actually, no. That's the point. I could do it anyway. Well, we'll talk offline because that'll bore everyone about my travel arrangements.
Okay, so Andrew, I will now copy the link across for testing. This is weird. Sorry, I'm just in Slack. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, please start presenting and I'll make the page ready. It took us significantly longer to get from town back out today, so I really apologize for things not having been done. We literally came in the door with 2 minutes.
No, it's a good timing because this update this week is pretty light. I spent a bit of time working on like some fancy stuff, and then I spent the other part of the work week trying to develop some of the map interactions. But the map's not ready yet, so I just sort of turned it off for this update and pushed what I had. So the main thing you'll notice are sort of document interaction upgrades. Before, they would sort of generate, you could see what they were doing. So on a slower internet connection, or if you're loading a large document, you can see the blocks of text sort of like popping in as they're populated, and then the whole document snaps in and becomes what we see in the normal read view. And, that's not great. Kind of looks unfinished. So I added a sort of loading animation you don't see the document until it's fully loaded. Instead, there's a little like spinning icon. Once it's done loading, it'll then appear with a nice little animation of it sort of expanding. It feels a lot more polished with just some simple UI stuff. And then I also added a close button because I realized we end up kind of cluttering the space pretty quick, and we'd always want to get rid of things. So I think my solution for the close button was pretty subtle. It's just a tiny little dot in the top corner, but when you hover over it, it then expands into a proper icon. And that does the same thing, closes the document with a little animation. That's pretty much it. That's all that's in this update. Unless I forgot to turn something else off and there's like broken map code, but we'll see. Shouldn't be there.
Thank you. Yay.
Nice, quick and easy.
Quick question. Just looking at the Text Lab site. Is I'm just trying to find. There's a 22 May link. Does what's at the end of that now include what you've just done, or is there a different endpoint we should be looking at?
I can pull up the Basecamp link here. Usually the Basecamp content is in.
Reload.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, just reload. Sorry for interrupting, but yeah, just reload. I'm sorry.
Okay, got it. Yeah, cool. No, that's great. Yeah, the one thing I must say, I wish there was a magic thing that would allow me to basically tell my web browser on my computer to just tell Oculus to just open this damn page. So you're not faffing around, sort of headset on, headset off, glasses on, glasses off, to get from screen space to thing. But that's not your problem. That's our collective problem.
Well, I mean that's why I should have updated the page, obviously. So
Sure.
to get around it. And
One thing that we could do, if people are interested in this, I could have two different links, like one for the archived test version, and then I could have like a current testing folder that I just update every week. So you always go to the same link every time, and the space updates. That might be useful for people. Seeing thumbs up from Mark.
No, I think that makes sense, and I think we're all grown up enough to know that if we go to the latest thing and it just for some reason doesn't work, well, we can, there are other ways into it. But it's this thing of just cutting down the time it takes to get to the thing that you're looking at, which is partly the experience of using the tool. But if you don't have lots of stuff sort of easily lodged in the system, then that could be useful. Fabienne.
Yeah, just a quick trick I posted in the chat, but if you are on the same Wi-Fi as your headset, the hmd.link webpage works quite well. And if you append the URL after the hmd.link ? Then it will directly open with that URL. And if basically what I have on my headsets is hmd.link as a bookmark on the desktop, I open that, paste it, open on the headset, and it solves most of the problems. You can also use there is an app from Oculus for doing this kind of things, but I don't want to use it if I don't really have to. So yeah, that's my recommendation, hmd.link, because indeed the back and forth is really painful, and what Frode already did with the Future Lab, like the short URL helps, but overall hmd.link to me solve like 99% of those back and forth of opening old and new content.
I'm just trying to simplify on the page here. Just 1 second. Trust me, I'm not on Facebook, and if I was, I wouldn't tell you.
But I would.
Yeah, you would know. You would know. So sorry, almost done.
Big Brother is always watching.
Big Swedish Brother. That sounds like some kind of a dance anthem, doesn't it? Okay, so what I've done on the front page now, I think this should solve some of our issue. If you please go to futuretextlab.info and just reload that page. On the options of links, it goes straight to our current demos. So it should be, if you forget that, your browser will remember it easily, right? Yay, everyone says, I hope.
I'm trying to
Okay,
figure out,
good.
I just went there. What am I supposed to be looking at?
On the futuretextlab.info/nothing, just the main page.
Yeah.
If you please reload that in the bullet point menu list, the bottom item now is current XR experiments.
Yeah.
That goes straight through the list of our experiments. So it should be, when you're in the headset, it should be really quick to click through. And that's the one that, other than when the Swede makes me take too much time coming from town, should be updated every Wednesday. Fabian, do you have your hand up, or do you just want a high five?
No, it's an all hand, but we can always high five.
Okay, hang on. Indeed. Right. So following the agenda, Fabian, you mentioned something on Twitter about something or other, and you suggested maybe present it so we could better understand it. Now would be a good time.
Yay. So let me try the usual.
Oh, while you're setting it up, I just want to mention to the group, particularly Dini and Andrew, that Fabian is bringing his Vision Pro headset. So we will have 2 in-house for the weekend. So if you guys want to call in and do one of the spatial meeting things, we tried a brief test today. It's really interesting to do it in group and really talk about it while we're doing it.
I would love to do that. I've been wanting to do that for quite a while. So let me know when you want to.
That actually makes me curious, because did anybody do more than a call with 2 people at once?
No, this time will be 3. It'll be great.
Does it work though? I have no idea. 5 people?
5.
Okay. Well, yourself plus 4 others.
Well, plus now you kind of put me on the spot. I said I would do my best to try to bring it, and now you're saying on the record I'm bringing it. So I guess I have to for research.
You've won the volunteer now.
Sorry.
Yes.
That's the second time I put you on the spot. Next time you can shoot me.
And on the record, great. So do you
Not
see
till
my
the grant's
screen?
over. No shooting till the grant is over.
Okay,
Good
fair
point.
enough.
Is that some sort of a Texas rule? I guess it makes sense.
No, nothing Texan about that. They would say shoot and shoot without looking. Shoot and don't kill. Shoot and make sure you kill.
Yes. Oh,
Can you see the screen?
I can. And your cubes have got cool new corners. Please do tell us what is happening here.
So I'll press play. You redo a bit what I did last time, namely that you can pinch around to travel in space, which is kind of new, because until now I could travel in space but not bring the executional environment. But what's I don't want to overshare, but I have a bunch of ideas when I wake up or go to sleep, which is also why I nap when I can, and that happened at the special moment in between those 2 states. I thought, oh, but if I could teleport around, I could also teleport vertically, which I did in the past. But wouldn't it be fun if the teleporter itself could be moved around, which is what I did. So this little box now I can teleport on it, but then I can bring it somewhere else, look at it, and teleport again. And then I can go basically wherever I want, but in places that were basically not reachable until now. So I think in itself that's interesting, but that's not really what I want to highlight the most. What I want to highlight the most is it took literally 1 word. Like I added the target component, which is what allows me to grab things and move them around. And thus, because of composability, I had this totally new behavior. And I also want to argue why in this context about the future of text it matters, is because until now, my future of text, documents, code, etc., was mostly on the horizontal plane. and not really vertical. And now it can be vertical. Like I can have, because I showed the other day a Lego scaffolding, and the scaffolding tend to be vertical. So now I can think of this kind of tool, composable tool, as something vertical. And I think it's, yeah, if we can freely explore the volume, move it around, I think it's quite exciting. But again, with just one word, just because I brought together an object which was teleportable and then give it the ability to be moved around. Voilà.
Yeah, and I think having such anchors within the document, we have that in HTML, the document anchors, that you links within the document, having that in visible links within the viewpoints or vantage points within the space is something I think will be very important for larger collections, that you can get to not just a specific document, but also a specific view over many documents. So I think it will serve a dual purpose, both for transportation, but also for kind of crafting a nice view, an overview of a collection of documents. And you can have multiples. And as we said before, they could be like in a museum with an attached audio guide, in that we have a small little ghost, we call it ghost at some point or something. But even a gestural figure with hands and voice that could point to things from a specific vantage point. That could be an interesting way of doing mini exhibitions where the space and document blend together in an interesting way. I don't know if it's for Sloan, but it's for the future of virtual documents, at least.
One quick remark two quick remarks. The first one being, it's indeed something I did not show there on this example, but if you add hashtag teleporter ID at the end of the URL, instead of starting from, let's say, the center of the virtual room, you start from where that teleporter is. So that means if somebody gives you the URL with that specific teleporter viewpoint, you start from there. So it's like the position is embedded in the URL, and I think it's how we do it indeed in documents right now. Like, for example, if I copy paste the URL of something I've read at work and I want to keep on reading it at home, but I went already halfway through, or I send a specific paragraph to someone, I think there are good ways to navigate through document from web browsing we can learn from, and that's also, I think, one of the competitive advantage of WebXR. Like, yes, we know some of the cost, for example, some features being a bit late or some performance issue that we hope are going to catch up soon. But there are also advantages like, I hope this, namely anchors, and that we can directly use. And for example, if I go back to the hmd.link suggestion for Mark earlier, if one were to use this, then you share that link with the anchor, the hashtag at the end, and you start from that viewpoint. For now, it's only the viewpoint, not the orientation, but one can imagine playing with that too. And to go back on the second point, from Adam was there is a game I'm being hooked on at the moment, Elden Ring, and one of the mechanism is that you can put some graphs on the in the virtual world, so you can say, oh, there is a bad guy over there, for example, and also you have like ghost-like behavior, people pointing or dying a certain way, and then you can learn from that. And I think indeed that's definitely something that we can use. It sounds, honestly, when you say it like this, very video game-ish and not necessarily exciting for academic research, but I think there is at least something to learn from it. And I think it's let's say the basic of education is you point at something like joint, look at, and helping, I think, a lot.
Yeah, Mark.
Adam, did you have a report, or Fred, do you have a response to that before I come in?
I'm okay waiting, but was that on just what he said?
Yeah, one thing that it will help, that kind of speaking of ghosts and the anchor points and the spatial anchor points or places you could go, fixed viewpoints, is in multiplayer, which we are going to do at some point. I've noticed in virtual worlds, even in more information dense worlds, presentations and so on, people teleport and move around, and you don't know where they went. So having some sort of ghost trail where you could see that someone teleported from this direction to another place would be very useful to see where so you could follow along. If you have some sort of guide guiding you through a document, you want to see where they came from and where they went at some point.
Can we call it a light trail?
Yeah, light trail would be better than ghost. Ghost could be a bit spooky. Yeah, over.
Hang on, ghost and murder wall, that works. No,
Have
okay.
to drop your murder wall.
Yeah, Mark, please.
Writer's room.
So this question comes out of ignorance, not whether because there's a hidden thing behind it. I really like this idea of, in a sense, having the choice of, you know, either you move the environment in a sense around you, or you leave the environment as it is, but you move within it. I like that flexibility. I just wondered, does that pose any issues for the way the environment is constructed or the objects? So I don't know, but if it doesn't, that's great. And if it does, I hope we find a way around it, because I think it's a really interesting idea. So thank you for that, Emma.
Well, some of the challenge in poses is it's like if you have a hierarchy of objects, like a scene, if you put everything, let's say, on the first level, everything is not has the single scene as a parent, it's pretty trivial. But then when you start to have transformations, scale, rotation, etc., it can become a little bit hairy, which is why teleportation in my environment did not work, because basically I was literally leaving my virtual hands behind. So I was teleporting there, but then I shook my hands and they were like 10 meters back, which is kind of fun, but a little bit strange. And then if I did manage to bring the hand, then the notes and the code was not there. And that was the problem, that I wasn't properly managing the hierarchy of objects. And now I've kind of do, but not properly. So some of the transformation, like scaling, doesn't work, which is why initially when I put the multiple cubes on the hands, some of them were too big or too small. But I don't think it's just because I'm doing it quickly. I don't think there is anything particularly complex if done right. And I think it is important, I think, to do it right, because, for example, if you manage the hierarchy properly, you can scale or move only part of the world, and then instead of grouping, and if you have a mental model of the hierarchy in that document or that scene, then instead of like doing a lasso circling, and if you know this is like a tree of objects, you take the parent from those objects and you move this or you transform that, then it's quite a powerful way. So I think if it can be done, I don't do it properly, to be very honest, properly enough to work and do the demo. But it will have to be refactored and done properly at some point. But yeah, it's at least enough in my opinion right now to open up some ideas and do some manipulation that are not fake, but that really work.
Peter.
Yeah, I was wondering, do we know if there's any difference between vertical translation of a person's viewpoint versus horizontal plane translations in terms of inducing sim sickness? Would you be better if you have your movement happening in the vertical plane versus moving sideways and forward and backwards? And also, what do you think would be more comfortable for the viewer? Let's say that we have a very large body of text. We decide we don't want to go with the paginated model. Instead, let's just format it and wrap it at lines of, say, 50 characters wide, and it might wind up working out to be 12 feet tall for the entire document if rendered at whatever font size we choose in the virtual world. Would it be better for us to move up and down over those 12 feet, or for the panel that the text is written on to move up and down over the 12 feet? And is it better if it jumps versus a smooth scroll? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that because of the Bob Horn mural, that test that Brandel did for us. When you move in the environment with a joystick or something, to me, it became nauseous. But the thing of you move the environment yourself, so you pinch to move the entire mural, I never felt motion sickness. Similar is soft space, where what you do a grab motion and you can move everything. And that because it's very strange how we're wired. So I can't answer the up or down or sideways question. I understand that's what you really asked. But in terms of moving ourselves in space versus moving the space is very different. But I think also what Fabian was talking about was jumping, which is a lot less motion sickness inducing than anything else. And I see the hand behind me here. But the other point was, Mark, I think it was close to what you talked about. We talked about how much to have coordinates for things in the space, to have coordinates for yourself in the space was kind of briefly touched upon in the beginning, but to have that be a more important thing. You know, we talk about having knowledge as sculptures, to be able to jump around the sculpture. Maybe these locations, Fabian, obviously they can be live and you throw the view camera to call the teleportation device that. But maybe also would be fantastic to have, here's a knowledge sculpture, and here are the viewpoints, and they suggest different things. And then we need to determine whether it's best to move the thing or ourselves. Your hand up.
I have some personal observations for trying out, especially AR work with camera pass-through on the Quest and lots of text. For me, it worked much better to lay out material horizontally, basically at eye level and more like whiteboards all over the place, instead of having text disappearing through the ceiling or floor up and down. So that's something to consider. If you have material that sticks up, goes in vertical direction in an AR mode, I think it's better to send it upwards. If for me personally, it felt better to have lots of material in the sky than having it blocking physical furniture and being a potential risk or cluttered on the feet. So that's some observations from me trying lots of text in AR specifically. For VR, my observation is that I've been trying, at least with the kids, flying around is something they grasped within perhaps 10 or 20 seconds, not minutes, not hours. Flying around in Mozilla hubs, for example, was picked. They never had flown in 3D before, and they in 20 seconds everyone was flying, and they're like flying up and down, and so it's a potential kind of movement in VR that could be used, but we still need to. There are many tricks, and I don't know all of them, in how you handle peripheral vision objects. They can both induce and reduce this kind of VR sickness, and there are many tricks that we could look into if we ever go into some sort of transportation in space like that. Maybe Fabian knows more about it. There are some tunnel vision things where you block off some of the, that's one, but also kind of certain colors and certain particles you have in your peripheral vision can help out with VR sickness as well.
It's a lot of different factors. The biggest one, in my opinion, experience has been basically the number of frames per second and world design. So basically, if there is any lag and motion at the same time, even if you have a lot of experience, it's going to be pretty terrible. Luckily, or rather, I guess, because Meta, who invested so much money on it, like, we can't trust developers and world designers, so we're going to force a way to make it at least kind of feel like it's at 90 FPS or at least a reasonable minimum frame rate. So this is mostly solved. And then I think from that, it's a lot of well, it's still experience design. For example, if you move around from your own volition, you can handle so much more. If you, like, for example, move in the 3D space with your legs, or even what I showed here with the cube that you look at, if you get thrown into random, how do you say, like a cube in space 5 meters above you, and you haven't decided, like it happens to you, it takes you a couple of seconds to get comfortable, and you can get uncomfortable because, for example, there is no it looks like a cliff basically, so there is no floor, and even though you know there is a floor, it's really strange. Whereas if you make the decision, so I think volition or agency has a huge impact, and then it means you can explore crazier things, like flipping the world around, like literally you rotate the world, and if it's something that happens to you, you might even fall and puke at the same time. It's a bad place to be in. But if you start to rotate it yourself, then you can handle a lot more. And then there are a couple of like design tricks that you add a platform, and even if you teleport around, then it feels you're still on the ground, so it's not a problem. I think Adam also started to hint at this. You can like blink. So you turn off the environment, you turn on everything is black basically for half a second. It's really not much, but long enough to trick your brain to think, oh, I've been thrown or teleported or whatnot. I don't know what exactly happens to the mind, but somehow you accept. For example, if I close my eyes and I turn my chair, it's not a big deal. Whereas if I do, I might get nauseous. I mean, there are so many little things like this, but I would say a lot of it, let's say the big picture is, I think the mind is a lot more flexible, and we're just not really trained to give ourselves the freedom to do so. So I would tend to explore a lot crazier things. And when I did the first experiment there with moving the teleporter around and looking at it, my first reflex was I need to add a platform at it, because it's going to feel weird, it's going to feel insecure. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try anyway, too lazy for this. And because I did the action itself of teleporting, then I did not need like to have a platform under, which normally is what's suggested. So I think it's a lot mainly about agency. And again, as long as you have like the minimum specs in terms of frame per second and I guess readability of the environment, visibility, maybe even trust in it. For example, if your software solution is buggy, and then you get teleported or thrown at, then maybe you think it's not the proper behavior, and then you always like on guard, a bit like when you read a grammatical or a typo in a text, and then you always like on the lookout for more. So I think it's the intersection of all this.
Yeah, thank you, Fabian. Mark?
Yeah, I assume that in a sense the motion sickness in VR is essentially no different to seasickness or air sickness. I mean, because it's partly the different sensory inputs not agreeing. So I mean, it's like if you stand on the deck of a ship and see the ship going up and down, you're far less likely to feel seasick than standing inside, where your ears are saying you're going up and down, your eyes saying you're not, and your stomach, reacts accordingly. But I was. So in a sense, reducing that sense of disconnect, and some of the things already been mentioned seem to speak to that, because in a sense that's what you're doing. You're giving your brain more time to catch up. I think from my limited experience of sort of VR and XR is also that if things are quite low res, now whether that's low frame rate or just a bit fuzzy, it's your eyes and brain are working a lot harder. Your visual bit of your brain is basically sort of trying to turn it into something crisper. It's trying to understand it. It's a bit fuzzy, and I've definitely felt strain from that. So not sickness, but it definitely can be headache inducing. And the last point quickly to make is something that, and I don't know if it's pertinent, but one thing I've noticed, if you watch people, they do films inside people doing aerobatic flying, and one thing really interesting you see is people that often move their heads before they move the airplane. And I think that's, again, this thing about it's agency. If you know you're going to do something and then something weird happens, it's not weird because you knew it was going to happen. And I assume the reason you probably looked to the horizon, you probably looked to something like the horizon, like a point, because you then know there's going to be a rotation around it. If you're just sort of whirling yourself around with no point of reference, I suspect that's more difficult. But I think it just feeds into the same thing that I think, whilst any individual of us will be more or less prone to some sense of sickness from the moving, I don't think it has to be an expectation, and the methods that people have mentioned, I think, will go well to reducing that.
Can I ask a question in response to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Why? I mean, I never get sick inside of a headset or when I'm on a boat or when I'm in a car. Or what causes that? I mean, why
It-
some people and not others? I absolutely do not feel
Well, I think
anything.
it's just the
I
resilience.
can play in a
Sorry,
headset for
yeah.
hours.
But I mean, I mean, I spend enough time at sea, for instance, to know that anyone can get seasick. It gets rough enough, kind of thing. So there's always a degree of, it's more than one factor, but the primary thing I think tends to be one's individual resilience, and I don't mean that in a sort of judgmental way, to differing input from different senses, primarily in the physical world in terms of air and sea. It's to do with eyes and ears, not getting the same. Not getting in a sense the same sensory input, or a sensory input that gives them the same result in the brain. Peter.
Okay, in hyperreality, Curtis Hickman posited a theory as to what causes you to get nauseous, and that it was an evolutionary response, because the most likely thing as man was evolving to cause him to get that kind of a sensation where his eyes weren't syncing up with what his vestibular system was reporting as far as motion goes would be if you'd eaten something poisonous. Therefore, if your body sees those kinds of sensory inputs, it concludes that you have poison in your stomach and makes you want to puke your guts out in order to clear your body of the poisonous plant that you ate by accident. So that was his theory there. I also highly recommend, he has an entire chapter devoted to movement in VR experiences based upon an experience at his company, The Void, where they were simulating traveling on an anti-grav skiff for a Star Wars experience. And what they found was that if they represented the motion as having a very rapid short duration acceleration at the beginning and the start, with constant motion in the middle, your brain wouldn't have a chance to pick up on the fact that you weren't really accelerating during the acceleration phase. It would then see the constant motion and assume that you were basically in a moving vehicle like a car traveling at a constant speed, that there was no acceleration, so that wouldn't phase you. Then they had the problem that the Star Wars property people said, well, we want the experience to feel bigger, but we don't want it to take any more time. So they wanted to make, you were traveling to a distant outpost base through a desert, and you could see the base in the far distance, and they wanted the volume of the space to seem much bigger than it actually was. Now, because in order to avoid puking, they wanted to keep your apparent travel at a constant rate of speed, they had the problem of how can we reduce the time that it takes to get there. Then they leveraged the psychological phenomena of change blindness to very briefly distract you from a physical jump in location. So what they did was they had basically a flying saucer swoop down and block your view of the base that you were traveling towards, and then they would jump you 1/3 of the distance, having all of the surrounding objects, if you were looking a little bit to the side, also jump at that exact same rate of speed. And if you were looking in the reverse direction, they could do something similar by distracting you slightly and then having the item in the distance appear to sort of jump to be more distant. But as long as you were distracted at the instant of the teleportation jump, your brain was completely oblivious to the fact that the surroundings had moved. You just have to be visually distracted so you're not focused on the item whose relative size is entering the big jump there. And
A new way to
it worked
speed
very
read.
effectively.
Sending a flying saucer and change the page number then for PDFs. Suddenly you read 100.
Yeah, so in this case,
pictures
it could
in
just
5
be,
minutes.
maybe the intelligent agent could pop up for a second and you'd have the little AI face blocking your view of the sheets while your location in the room changed slightly, and then that message screen disappears and you're in the new location, but you would have thought that you were traveling at a constant speed, even though you weren't. So that's how they can sort of mess with time. But I strongly, strongly recommend Curtis Hickman's book on hyperreality. He has a whole chapter, and he goes at length with lots of nice footnotes into all those psychological effects and how they were able to play games with them that they could leverage gain. And they found there was like certain percentages that are in the book describing how much you can stretch the relative distance before a person notices that those distortions were taking place. And as long as you stay below those parameters, and of course, it depends on whether you're focused on a task or not. If you're not focused on anything other than watching where you're going, then the amount that they can play with it goes down dramatically. But if you're distracted by something, then what they can get away with in shifting your perspective before your limbic system kicks in and makes you start to feel nauseous goes up.
Yeah. So on that, but just briefly, because of Mark's comment further up about the liquid mode. Yeah, I looked into it, Mark, and it's basically, I would say, Adobe admitting there's a structure problem with PDF. However, in Reader, I've been playing with a flow mode that essentially does that. All I'm asked the ChatGPT 4.0 is to take, do a little bit of extracting. And what's fascinating is that ligatures are fixed. I've had the guys working on ligatures from PDFs, and we can't figure out a way to cleanly guess what the word is. So that's a useful thing to have. Now, with the Sloan work, we're not going to be moving at all. It's swivel chair based. So that's a very important thing. And I think one of the key things that Fabian was presenting is that you're not moving, you're teleporting. So that UFO in front of you is that moment. You're literally not moving, and that is a lot less. But to answer an earlier question about what kind of motion, I've noticed when I do move in VR games, if I move straight ahead, is okay. So what I tend to do, I move straight away, and then I turn, and then I go straight ahead. Once it doesn't, once my inner ear in the body, it doesn't work. And that's why the Quest Pro, I think, is very good, because you do have peripheral vision. So even though you can see things moving in front of you, it helps anchor, at least for my biology. And I think that's why some of the things in the Vision Pro are 3D but framed. Like the dinosaur experience or whatever. It's not all encompassing around you because you have enough of an anchoring. So the balance between anchoring and motion is interesting. Yeah, Fabian, and then we move forward, literally.
Yeah, to go back a little bit on Peter's point about, it's a great book, and overall the work he's done it's entirely pragmatic. Basically, I think as a magician, kind of, it's like, okay, we have different theories and ideas, but let's see what works, basically. And I think doing it commercially is good in the sense that we know what works for a lot of people. I don't want to say for most people, but like, because they need to make money of it from Disney, I think. Then yeah, it's not just for somebody who is super experienced in VR, for example. But most importantly, on the very last point, it's also that's why I mentioned the magician part. Is a lot of it is managing attention. And indeed, for example, if you make some noise in that part of the world, and I'm looking there, you on the webcam can see behind me, but I can't. And if everything literally changes behind me, it's not a big deal. And there are a couple of games like this, like I forgot the name, but they were basically non-Euclidean space, because the space there in front of me is okay. But for example, what changed behind me, so I can, for example, make a staircase that when I turn around is there, wasn't there before. So the world kind of grows at it. And I think it's kind of my point earlier about it shouldn't have worked. I should have wanted to have a platform while teleporting up because it felt safer, and yet somehow, I guess because agency is okay, a lot of it is very I think it's better to just try and not make too many assumptions, and maybe managing attention, the blinking part to make teleportation safer. Somehow it works. Somehow it feels like we're dumb mammals walking around. Like, how can we be tricked so easily? And yet somehow it works. Yet somehow, like, black space and boom, I can accept that I've been thrown away somewhere else and it works. It's kind of crazy, but it does show that, yeah, our attention is very not just flexible, but if we learn to shape it the right way, it enables us in that virtual space to do a lot more, including things that are normally not possible. So I think the kind of magician mindset with a look at my assistant and not my hands doing the magic trick is quite powerful, actually.
So yeah, really, really important. So Paul Smart, colleague of Mark Anderson and me, the philosophy, modern philosophy of how the brain works is, as I think we've discussed, it's kind of interrupt driven. The brain is a prediction machine, and it gives you awareness when something suddenly interrupts you like that, right? Adam couldn't not react to that. But anything that is as you expect, we don't react to. So to manage expectations, I think that's what you're talking about, Fabian, and also you, Peter, that you are aware of this kind of motion, at a deep level makes a difference. The one thing that Adam and I talked about today was, because you talked about behind, maybe as you do work and you save something, it goes over you and behind you. So like in the backup servers on the Mac, you can turn around and you have a history of your work. So maybe we decide on something spatialized in our environment, but I also like the non-Euclidean tenet style where you can literally warp space to your effect. That's when it's becoming really interesting. Now we're coming up to the first hour. Ini, what do you think? Is this a good time to move on to our scenario to see what
I think so. We need time. We need time for that.
Okay. Do you want to do screen share since you have the latest and greatest version?
Let me see. Well, I didn't make any changes to it at all, Frodo.
Oh, okay.
You go ahead. I didn't have time.
Time is precious. Okay. So what this is something we've talked about a little bit before, and this is just going to share on the. Can you see this?
Yeah, and can we explain to them this is not it's not a script.
Yeah,
but it's a kind of
sorry.
It's a kind of walkthrough, like kind of moving towards a script and also towards a kind of a technical communications document that lays out the format of how we function in the space from beginning to end. So
yeah, exactly.
Finished.
So it is written as a script. It is not a script. Okay, sorry. Developers asking a question. I'll answer later. Right, it's written as though it is a script, but it isn't. But let's pretend it is, in the sense that let's pretend that Andrew has all the time in the world, and there is some kind of a voice tour in this thing. So let's not get hung up on the language, so to speak. Let's look at what this says should happen. Some of these things are not what Andrew has built. There are a few different things. That just means we need to discuss it. Not a single thing in here is decided. Interrupt at any time. Please don't use a hand because I can't see it, okay? So in our loading screen, as we have now, we'll have similar text to what we already have. We will also have radio buttons for right and left-handed, so that in the future, when this thing refers to, we don't want prominent hand or anything, it gets confusing. We'll just say your right hand, your left hand. Also, as we have now an option to upload a library, we will have that, but it'll also say which library is active and when it was updated. So you have a feeling whether you are really looking at the library you think you have. Also, we are locking on the introduction for the demo. It'll always be there. This stuff, Andrew, specifically for you, seems reasonable to list, especially this, right? If we decide to do it. Hang on, I'll make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, I can't really read it, but what you described verbally seems reasonable for that part.
Okay, cool, simple. So I'll just read this. You don't have to read the screen, but so the initial environment, and when we're talking about environment, what we mean is the visual surround, the non-active bits, to make sure we have the shared language for this. Has nothing there, only dark gray as we have now. Users will have the option to change environment background later. I just realized I needed to use that word again. So also for the demo, only single document appears in front of them. It isn't a library, so to speak, yet. So the voice would say something like, welcome, we start here in the library. For this demonstration, you will have access to the ACM Hypertext proceedings. Notice mark, it doesn't say what year, shown in front of you. just point to it and pinch your fingers to open it. And here we get to the notion of maybe helping the user. So if nothing happens for a while, if we have the voice, maybe it says something like, please point to ACM Hypertext proceedings by pointing to it with your index finger, making sure that the line extends from your hand, lining up with the proceedings, then pinch your index finger to your thumb to open it. Just as
Got to jump in real quick because I
course.
know you said interrupt if something's incorrect.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't raycast out of your finger. That was an old design we had like 2 months ago, and people didn't like it. So it's from halfway between the index and thumb, and it's kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a little bit hard to explain to the user where it's showing up. So maybe for this part, we have the line always visible, and then the line fades out once they complete this first task or something.
Yeah, I know that, and I think you made a great decision for that. I purposefully misled the user because, as you say, it's too hard to explain that. So it kind of feels like it's the finger, maybe slightly off. But anyway, this is. Thank you for interrupting, but it's not really something to change now anyway.
Gotcha. Okay. Pointing, if you're trying to like point at something though and it's not selecting, the user's going to get frustrated very fast if that's what they expect to happen.
It should be point and then do the index finger pointing, right? That's select.
No, it never points from the index finger. You do have to do the 3-finger curl to turn it on. I feel like this is best described to the user with like an icon or some kind of like image that shows up in front of them, showing them the hand gesture. That's easy to pick up on. It's what we've done for some other VR projects.
Yeah, okay, that's very good. I'll write that down. Show hand doing this. Yeah, let's really have a machine hand in front of you doing that motion, and they can turn it off. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Right, reading. By the way, it looks like a long script. It isn't. You'll notice the library fading and moving away from you in the background. This is when you have touched the document to open it. You're now in what we call the reading room. The ACM Hypertext proceedings is shown to you as a list of titles of the papers it contains in the order they were published. We expect that one of the first things you'd like to do is to determine which papers are relevant to you and which you'd like to go through first, so that you're up to speed on this conference. This is what we will go through now. Again, please, of bigger issues like this, if you disagree with this aim, absolutely totally fine. Just write a note and we'll go through that after, because now we're just doing the mechanics, right? To augment how you can see what papers might interest you, there are what we call elements in the space. You can fully customize these. We have just provided you with a set of starting elements. A key element in this collection of papers is who wrote them, which is why we've set up a list of all the authors on your left. You can select any author or authors, and you will see that the papers that are not authored by them will fade a bit, letting you focus on your selection. The top of the list of authors, you can see it says authors. This is both a heading and a virtual envelope. You can tap on the heading to fold all the authors into it and tap again for them to reappear. So that's an action we may or may not have. I'm not sure if it's useful, but that's the kind of thing that's being presented. In addition to pointing, pinching, and touching the sphere on your wrist, there are a few other useful gestures for you. It's actually really just two. Make a fist with your left hand. This gesture allows you to select more. So it would be the same as a command key or a shift key, right, guys? First, make sure you've selected one or more elements and that one or more papers are therefore highlighted. You can now choose to select more, as you might do in a desktop computer by holding Shift or Command. You do this by making a fist with your left hand as though you are grabbing and holding on to something. Sorry. And then you can keep pinching.
Could we elaborate a bit more on what that is? Because I have never heard of this functionality before. So if I'm implementing it, I need to know what it is.
This is the point of showing this. This is a new thing. It is just a suggestion. And that is exactly what we're discussing. There aren't that many things, so we can spend some time on it. We need some way of, when you have selected stuff, to be able to select more without losing your selection. And we don't have a keyboard. So one of the things Adam was talking about today is you know, it's very easy to get misreadings, as we found out. But if you do one hand to another somehow, that's very deliberate. So the whole idea here is quite simply, I pointed, and now I'm just indicating the system with my left hand. I want to hold on to these, but I also want this one, that one, and so on. So how do you guys feel about that being a potential thing? When I let go of the left hand, obviously flippable for left-handers, then
Is this
everything's still selected, and I can move them, but I can't select more than it'll deselect.
for the map view? Because or are you talking about selecting multiple documents?
The map view, so to speak, is this. Yes, we're kind of always in a map view. It starts with this. It starts with the list, but you can start doing things, you know, like having elements on the side, and you start moving things around.
So you're saying the map view is part of the reading space, the workspace as we've been calling it.
This is what we need to decide together. I am confused here, and I'm thinking that first of all, if we ignore the map kind of thing for a moment, and we think just a column of things, the elements in the room, such as, you know, George Washington or whatever keywords or LLMs are the things in the room that can change what you're looking at. Yeah, Dini.
Yeah, one thing we talked about last week, and Frodo and I worked on this for about an hour yesterday, trying to come up with common terminology. But the idea is that the user puts on the headset and enters into the virtual space, right? And they land into an environment, they teleport into an environment. The default environment is that gray environment we've already built, the minimalist look. There could be some other choices down the line, perhaps a classic reading room, perhaps a nature-based, but they're in an environment, right? And so then they are able to access the ACM library or whatever libraries in the future are available. But right now, the ACM library, and they tap on it, it opens up. Now, when it opens up, it becomes like a workspace for them. Right, so their workspace is in front of them, kind of like how you organize your desk. It's organized here, right? And so that's what we mean by workspace. What is niggling us is the term that we're using called map, and that's the thing in which you move things around in your workspace, and you're able to reorient. We don't have a word for that. We're using map right now. And that's been driving us crazy. And Mark's got his hands up. So I'm hoping Mark has a brilliant idea.
Well,
but that's a scenario. So Mark, go ahead.
So to me, and obviously like everyone, it's just based on experience. So obviously not everyone else's experience. So to me, a sort of map basically implies an area of free-form use. Now, a map could be the whole of the environment. So the word that springs to mind, if you're talking about the space you're in, it is the holodeck. It's the environment you're in, because it's endless and unceasing. And one other quick thought listening to this is that I think it's really useful to do this. So this is what we want. This is what we want people to understand. I'm not sure we'll be able to do it like this, because my experience of writing things like this is, then the immediate question is, why am I doing this? So I think the way when we've worked out what we want them to see, and this is really good because this is sort of paring it down, is to then recast it in the form of you're going to do, in other words, that they're doing it for a purpose. At the moment, we're telling them things they might do in an environment they don't yet understand, which means that they lack the experience of us as the authors in writing this. So I suspect what will bridge that is, in a sense, pre-explaining that you're going to do something, and then you explain how it is, because that makes more sense. Oh, right, if I didn't know how to do this, I wouldn't be able to do that action. But I don't think it's necessary to do this now. I think this is really important. So my point isn't a critique, but I think in terms of making it useful to the user. And one other thing I did wonder is, are we able to effectively do like as a picture-in-picture? Because the other thing is, it's often very difficult to explain some of these movements, which are obvious after the fact, but perhaps if you literally just saw an animation of somebody doing it, and that could be off to one side or something, as sort of part of the help. So if you didn't get it from the explanation, you could have it shown to you, because most people can probably repeat it. once they've seen it if they didn't explain it. Yes, Fred.
Yeah, that's what I think Andrew suggested for the introduction, the pointing and so on. So yeah, if we can, we will definitely have a hand doing it. If we can't implement it by when we're showing it, it's okay. The person putting the thing on the person will literally stand there as a human being and show. So yes, it's crucial to not just talk it, no question.
And if that's not possible, another thought is, I mean, in the sense that there's no reason we can't show an area in our environment that, even if it's just a video of somebody's hand doing it, it's whatever it makes, it's whatever we need for the person who has no experience before to just get over that hump of, oh, right, I need to make this shape or do this gesture.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessary. It's nice if we can do it in the métier of the environment we're working in, but if that just proves to be difficult in the short term, one possible sort of fallback is in essence to show some video of something, possibly in a window. And I know it's not as elegant, but I just park that as a thought.
No, I don't have a problem with that. And I think we should ignore that for now because it's important, meaning that I think that what we should probably shoot for the actual hypertext conference is literally a computer monitor on the side of this with a video presentation, screen captures, all of this stuff. So when someone puts on the headset, they know this stuff. So that's why I'm saying we should ignore it because we will elevate it to its own experience. Dini, what do you think? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so someone's waiting for the headset they go through. Okay, so let's go back to the notion of map, Andrew. For the time being, I feel we are talking about there is no map or no map. It's always movable things everywhere in space, which is why management of these things will be crucial. So
Okay.
currently, right now, we're breaking a lot of what you've done, but don't stress too much. We may very well circle back to it, okay?
Well, that's not particularly encouraging, saying it's broken now, so then I fix it, and then that's broken, and we have to put it back. That's
No, Andrew, what I mean is this is a really important session. We're going to agree to some things here, right?
Cool.
So let's
I started doing some work already on the map. It's currently its own space because that's how it was presented to me. I can change that, but not right now because it's halfway in development. So I'll have to like implement it and then change it.
What I mean, Andrew, is don't worry about it because we're talking loosely here. Those of us who don't have to code, by the end of this discussion today, we will have made some decisions, and you are 100% part of those decisions. So if you say that sounds great, but not now, or are you crazy? That's really important to us. So this is not a change being rammed down your throat. I'm just saying that I'm aware that what we're presenting here is quite different, but let's have it mellow a bit and see how it fits.
Cool.
So
Appreciate
that's
it.
all. Yeah, just
Nice.
so I'm trying to take a step back, but it shouldn't, come crashing down on you. So, okay, so it seems like for now, the notion of I want to select more, you do a grab thing, and then you point to things and you can add more. That seems to be a reasonable thing, maybe, right? That's all we want out of this. If someone comes up with a better gesture, fantastic. The second one is much more pertinent to the question of what space are we in? Because we used to be you're in this sphere or that sphere. Now we're talking about a pushing back thing. So I'll just read this. Pushing your left palm forward. This gesture allows you to focus. So if you've selected some items, documents, elements, whatever, if you now take your left palm and push it away, everything that isn't selected will snap to a further level away and then fade out a little bit, meaning I can work with this other stuff now without keep having selected. So that gets then into what you've been talking about a few times, Andrew, about having spaced kind of X, Y, Z axis borders. So that you can have something in the background, as it were. And that probably gets very much into the idea of what this space is. Because if you open things, and these are the things I want, push all that other stuff back. So, with that motion, you feel it snap back to kind of a library space. But then you can go to another document, open that, do things, and push something back. So you start having a 3D version of I'm working on this, but not that. Mark?
Yeah, I'm struggling to follow. I mean, I get the bit about focus. I don't really understand. I've read it several times. I can't visualize what's going to happen. I think what you're referring to is that you're trying to separate two bits of content.
What we're trying to do is, okay, just to show you real quick. So let's say we have something like this, right?
Yeah.
And through whatever reasons I've selected this stuff. Now I don't, the rest of it, I just want it to go away.
Right.
So whatever future views I do will only to do with these. If I write a new thing, the other things will be ignored. So the notion is simply that I've done that. I do this action, this action.
Yeah.
So everything goes into, like it's get glued onto the wall, like a writer's room or murder wall, whatever language. It's in the background. It's out.
So which bit, the non-selected? I mean,
yes.
this, and the fact you're using a picture to show me screams out that it's best not described with words. I'd literally show someone a picture.
No, I agree.
Because it's so much easier to understand.
No,
because
Mark,
yep.
That's why we need a video. You have convinced me of that. We have to do it. You're absolutely right. So, and the reason I keep emphasizing this one will be with your left hand is because with your right hand or your prominent hand or whatever it is what you're doing things with. So that's why it's more easy to understand. You just push away what you don't want, right? Because then the nice thing is you should have some sort of an interaction to point to the background in the future with your right hand, pinch to bring it back.
When you say your right hand, you mean the chosen dominant hand, because we're going to make so no just so I fully understand. Yeah, so basically it would be better to write it just for the understanding of this, for the practice, that dominant hand and non-dominant hand or something like that, because you use left and right. It has, especially if you're left-handed, you have to then translate round or to work out. In other words, is there a real meaning in it having to be left, or is it to do with it? So what the reason you're using a particular hand is you're using one that doesn't have the tool on it or something, which is fine. One other thing I just picked up on is we may need to, funnily enough, define focus a bit more, because I have a sense that it may have a slightly slippery meaning. So there's focus as in almost in terms of selection. There's focus focus might be the part of the environment that you want sort of close to you in that sort of focus. In fact, the way it's described here is doing something different. It's actually defocusing a whole lot of stuff, which is fine. But it just says to me, we probably need to, just iterate a bit on that term.
We're not using that term, though.
That is something different. I don't know.
We're not using the word focus in the description here.
Well, it says this gesture allows you to focus. That's what That's what.
All right. Yeah. Yes, in the kind of speaky bit, but in the. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Well, that's what I mean. Sorry, and I know it's difficult because having written the words, everything feels like critique, and that's not where this is coming from. It's just reading. So take it, can't think. Okay, what did I think that meant? What did I intuit this meant? Versus what did I read? And that's really what I'm picking up on.
Absolutely. So the last of the three gestures is that the palm of your hand, right or left. I don't know which one makes sense for this. If you look at it straight towards you for a second, you will get a cheat sheet showing you what the gestures are. Like literally a menu, show me how to do this, that, and the other. So that's just like a little guide thing. So we're basically done. We're going to now look at a little bit of the sphere. So the whole, okay, I'll just read it. You can move any element anywhere you like, but this can become a bit cumbersome. There are therefore controls for what is displayed, which you can access by tapping the sphere on your wrist. This will produce two primary set of options that appear as menus floating in front of you: elements and layouts. And when I say floating in front of you, I'm now thinking of the most boring, unimaginative, large text menus. One here, to start the discussion. Maybe we go back to that, but we should think much cleverer, right? Elements lets you toggle which elements are visible, and layouts let you specify how you want to lay out selected elements. You will have noticed that you also have options for settings and for help. Settings is where you can specify another library or set of libraries and choose your environment / background you'd like to work in, and what digital voice avatar you would prefer, if we have such a thing. These are not enabled for this walkthrough. Help is available to give you more information in written and spoken form. Anyway, so the simplicity of this to begin with is quite simply, you have chosen a document, a paper or papers, generally work with one at once. And within the elements, you're choosing the stuff that is around it. So you can choose to show all the keywords you have that are a person. Yeah.
Did we explain why we're in a sphere? Because the
No,
one thing I know is when
sphere
I'm
on your
standing in
wrist.
actual reality, I'm
Sphere
in.
on your wrist as a thing to touch.
Oh, I see. You mean the control on the wrist. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the display space around you. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So the thing is, it's a little bit contentious here, and we have some decisions to make. So an element can be as simple as a keyword, like George Washington, as I keep using, right? And you can choose to hide and show all elements that are people. But beginning to wonder now if these elements would have to come from the document or if they're from the user. They probably should come from the document, and the user can have their own.
Well, I take you back to the suggestion that they're all points in space in the environment, and they are basically, their appearance is clothed with whatever metadata we give them. So in the initial instance, you would expect it to come from the document because you haven't done anything to it. If you want to apply further information, you could, but I think that's too complicated to do in a demo. We've already given someone an awful lot to understand who's never seen this before. I think the bigger fundamental point, and one of the things that's so fundamental in the way this shifts us away from paginated print, is here is the information. It's whatever you want it to be, and it's malleable in virtually any form you want it to be, because what that object is, when a sort of Fabien's nice cubes or something, it doesn't matter if it's a green cube or a blue cube. I mean, they may have meaning, and you can assign them meaning, but I think the wrong evolutionary path to go down with this is to start thinking that you've got somehow points in space that are different in any other way but the metadata assigned to them, because I think you're just forcing a sort of set of classes that aren't needed, and actually then make it more difficult to do the wonderful transformation stuff that we can do in this space.
Okay, I do think we need to decide on some of this, because we do need things in order to have things. I don't think we can be too general about it, but there will definitely be keywords that are in the document, and the document has said, I have these keywords.
That's fine. So you have a point that knows it's a keyword. It doesn't have to be a keyword object. It's just a point in the space that knows it's a keyword.
Okay. There is a thing, though. George Washington is a person. So that means that you can choose to show and hide all persons.
Yes, but all you're doing is you're making a selection across the information. So it's a question as whether what I sense is that there's a sort of tension here between, do we design back from what we imagine we will visualize, or do we design out from the information we have? You can get to the same place. The one thing we want to avoid is doing both. I think working back from the visualization from experience always ends up difficult.
Okay, this is an important point of disagreement, because I could imagine having a set of elements that are important to me in the field of hypertext history, for instance. And when I load a paper or the proceedings from hypertext, I want to see if any of them refer to them, because I find that level of history interesting rather than some other sets of keywords, right? So that's why it's important for me to be able to assign that. And a really important notion, sorry, Peter, I just have to continue this whole thing and we'll get back to it, is that in addition to show and hide the elements, which, by the way, Fabian, should be able to include a smart element, which is my really dumb name for the kinds of things you're making. Please give me a better name to insert. that's just what should be on screen or not. So Mark and I will have a longer discussion on this with all of you, and it's useful. But please be aware that the other one is layout, which some of them are simple. Align everything I've selected to the left, center, space it out horizontally, vertical. Obvious, simple, and useful. But then there's the notion of a workspace. A workspace is all the stuff that relates to the information in the room. So it does not include the background. You can be on the beach in Hawaii, or you can be in a gray room. A workspace doesn't care about that. So that means that what elements are in the room and where are they? Right. So you can, for instance, have open up a document to a workspace where you have lots of hypertext people over here and this, and you really set it up. And then you snap your fingers, you load a different workspace, and suddenly now it's about a timeline or other stuff. And the main text stays the same because that is the text. That's the current thinking on this side of what a workspace is. Okay, on that point, over to you, Peter.
Okay. Oh, my train of thought derailed during your last segment there. Maybe dynamic would be a good name, or programmatic instead of smart for the elements there. Also, in my own work, I'm trying to tease out what elements I can extract from the HTML markup version of the files that ACM provided. So I'm working on an island grammar to try to tease out bits that might be potential elements. I'll see what kind of data I can successfully scrape from that in a semi-structured format, and that might suggest other possibilities that we can't see yet.
Okay, thank you. And Mark.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand this thing about the special people. So, I mean, so in your data set, you have some things where a Boolean is, special to me or special to Frode is true, which means that when you load them, you want them to be present. But I don't understand how they're more special than anything else. They're all just elements that are available. I still, it's just a bit of metadata. I don't understand why it has to be a separate class.
It's separate because a document will, if it has visual meta or equivalent, have certain named keyword entities in it, which you may not be aware of. Right. So you may choose, if you see the tags, keywords, names, whatever it is, based on the document, they may be off to a specific space where you have, let's say, dedicated, this is space for whatever the document has. And then separately, you have your own interests that are always there in that workspace. So
okay, so you have two sets of keywords from different sources, but they're all just keywords. The fact is, some of them are derived from an object, or they're basically, they are properties, they are metadata of the paper object, say you put in the space, but you basically have a essentially predefined separate set of other entities that are sort of keywords that are of interest to you, and that's absolutely fine. I don't see any disconnect in that. But they're all, it's just getting away from this fact that I don't understand how these are different classes of things, that they're all in, you're just talking about two sets of keywords. It's just some of them happen to be ones that you've predefined, and other ones are drawn either because they are stored as part of the document, or maybe they're dynamically extracted by something like an AI thing. So I really don't, I don't think there's a problem there at all.
It's a management issue of how to have it in the space. So when we talk about exploding documents or pop-up box or 3D documents, it kind of gets into that, because you should be able to have all these different, let's call them map views, so to speak, where you put these elements around, and hopefully at some point, some of these elements will be able to do more active things in the room, like maybe they are literally magnets, drawing other keywords to them. All those fancy things will probably be useful. So you want to be able to spend time laying out a room for, okay, I'm not going to study history. So any of the keywords that I have that are about history, I want them here, there, and there.
Okay, what I hear you describing actually is you're actually describing the informational aspect of a workspace.
Yes.
So again, that's fine, because basically you're just saying that for a workspace of this type, I want from, and effectively the other thing that's implicit in what you're describing is that because of the library word, that essentially I see why, that you will have a library of information objects, the most obvious one being types of keywords, groups of keywords, that essentially don't derive from your library of references. They're things that they're almost like annotation stuff, but this is something that you will have done personally. So this is another set of data that has emerged that isn't the library but sits with it. And then you'll just draw from that. So you would know that if I'm going into my personal workspace, or my workspace 3, which happens to be about history, I will want all the things that I've tagged as relevant to history to be elements in that space, and then you can decide where you want them. But again, they're nothing special. What gives them the specialty is the fact that you have that you've drawn them from a particular place, which is, as it were, your personal tag library. You've assigned them as being important to the task you're doing at the time, and you may further have sort of spatial layout type requirements for them, and that are of your choice, and that's fine. Yes. And so again, nothing of that suggests you need a special object for it.
Okay, it's a management issue, right? Just in terms of where you're going to put it in space. I think the system needs to know, here is Mark's set of things for history. By the way, Mark, here is a choice you can make to see these tags that happen to come with the document, which you may or may not have. It's just, we have to have some sort of means through which we have them in a nice place in space. That's all.
Well, your layout will tell you that, because you say you want to have these there. So you will, in setting up that layout, they will have a known vocabulary of items that may be shown or not according to your desire, and a position according to your desire. And you may, for instance, also gloss that data with something about some aspect of relative importance to the task you're about to do. Yeah, but that just comes in your setup. That's what you define in the workspace. So there isn't a management problem as far as I can see, because the management element is the workspace.
Yes, exactly. And I believe that is what we're working on. So when you open the document and choose, you've got all these things in the space that is your personal elements. Where do you just actually, what does the system put the elements from the document? I'm not saying it's an end of the world problem. All I'm saying is that we need to think of the interactions through whereby you can control where you want these things. That's it. Because they are different in the sense of where they come from.
So in other words, they're different in the sense they won't be the same for everybody. So it's something you are going to set up. And as we come to an understanding of the space, we may understand patterns we can use to sort of preset them.
It's also the opposite.
In a sense, what you're describing is the individual space, but that then doesn't scale, because each space is different. So what's important is to draw out the common thing that say there are 6 people, well, there are 7 people here, but that for the same workspace, they may all produce something different.
But Mark, what's important? It's the opposite of that, right? Danny, Andrew, all of us, we can have different personal workspaces. And thank you, Andrew. I took that language from you, of how you want your elements. But if we all load the same ACM document that has been analyzed for keywords and names, that's going to be common for all of us. And if we choose to view those keywords in that space, they have to go somewhere, and they may overlap something else or so on. So this, I'm not saying it's a big issue, but we should have an interaction to choose how those we didn't write ourselves, where they should be. That's all. Do you have a solution, Peter?
I think we really need to reify our queries so that they can actually be objects within the space. So that a query that I developed to find something can be an entity, maybe a little glowing green ball could represent queries that someone provided, and then I can share that with you. You can open that up and see what the sub-elements of the query were. And chaining across documents, I think, could be incredibly powerful. I'd like to be able to ask for all of the papers that were written by people who co-authored papers with individuals who studied at the MIT Media Lab, or give me all of the papers that are on topics that were identified as keywords
But
in
Peter,
papers
Peter,
by.
that's a little, can you please write that? But it's a little bit out of scope for this kind of interaction. It's important to do that. But that kind of logic would require the means through which that can be entered. And then we're kind of back to command line. So yes, it's important, but let's just talk about simple blocks in space for a bit, okay? Or do you think it can be done in this way?
Well, I think just the idea of being able to chain across papers so that instead of just asking about the immediate paper that I'm looking at, I want to be able to run the query against the papers that the paper is citing. Even if we only went out just one step, just to show that it's possible in the environment to chain into a search on the references as opposed to only looking at the individual paper that you have in front of you. And that's really the difference between reality and what we can do in a hyper-reality library. In reality, I'm looking at the paper, and I would have to go and find all of those papers. But in our environment, we should be able to run a query against the things that the thing is citing.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at that in the next section, which is yeah, okay. Right, so I think we've gotten closer to this, but I think we all agree at least we need some way to decide what things should be in the space, and then we should be able to lay it out in different ways, manually, computationally, and to save and load workspaces. That seems reasonable, right? Because I'm hoping as we agree to some of these interactions being necessary, we can all go off and think about how they should best be done. Right, so forget the voice command introduction if we have it, that's a bit much. Okay, so document interactions in this list, in typo there. Right, so this is very close to what we have now, Andrew, so this bit you can read. When you point to a specific paper, you will see the author's names and abstracts appear to the right. When you point to a specific paper, you will see several options appear to the left of the title, since then they won't move because it's left aligned. These are the options that we're currently thinking of having here. Please remind me if I'm missing any. One of them is open, so we don't have to worry about double taps and stuff. Maybe we do. Information, I don't know what we should actually call that, but that is to see the metadata about this document. And then there is one where you can add and edit the metadata. And then we have the importance of, what was that? Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Sorry, everyone. Adam has become the
Doorman.
security because he's got, you know, very serious looking head. So yeah, so two of the really important ones is one button, so to speak, that says this is a paper I'm interested in, and another one that says I'm not interested, whatever we choose to label. Are those reasonable options for when you point to a paper in the abstract proceedings? Yes, Dini?
Yeah, now that you're saying that, maybe we say for information and metadata, how about
maybe? Sorry.
yeah, and then my mind just totally went blank.
Is it the document structure?
Add metadata. Yeah, add metadata.
Because the about strikes me as that seems to be the document decomposition button in a sense, because that takes you into whatever we know or are able to compute about it. So in other words, you might just want the reference list or the abstract, or you just might want paragraph 2 of section 3 or whatever. And it's going to vary by document to document because some have more structure than others. But it would seem that off that second thing, that's behind that is all these bits that at the moment you can only get by reading by eye the document in paper or facsimile paper form. And one of the things that we're doing here is we are blowing apart the sort of legacy of pagination and the document boundary, because as Peter's observation about queries comes in, what in the reading you're trying to do often is to situate something in terms of the wider knowledge, and a trained academic reader has to do this in their head because there is no other way, because things are broadly imprisoned within our legacy tech, which is the page, still, even though we're not using paper. And so a really interesting part here, this is the really key part, I think, is being able to tease that apart. And if necessary, or if that's where your thought process goes, you might literally go into the document and out of that and straight out through a reference to something else, because that is the thing your mind needs to resolve before you can say, then go back and read the next section of the paper.
Can we say read metadata and add metadata instead of about read metadata or read current metadata?
Yeah, just I added something because of what Mark said. So open now would mean open into its own thing, away from the other stuff. The outline, I think, is what you were talking about, Mark, where the idea would be it's still in the list, but it goes down a bit. So it's basically what Andrew has built, but it shows in a box. And you can choose to make it bigger and smaller. It's an outline. You can click to read the beginning of section, so you get much more of an accordion feel.
And I mean, it's exploratory, this, and I don't deliberately try not to get too far ahead, because I can see all sorts of things we could do, but they've all got to be coded. And until we tried them, we won't know really what works.
No, exactly. So I'm thinking now, Dini, about the about issue. We may not need the about issue because we have, as we have now, you see the author's names and abstract appear to the right. So I think we can just delete that. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So then we have something like add metadata or manage metadata.
Manage is good.
Manage metadata. And then we have this super important pin or hide. That's what I use in Reader now. I don't think it's the best language, but favorite and like is a bit social media-ish. Maybe interesting.
If you want to keep your menu short, to be perfectly honest, I suspect you could just make the third one metadata, because it should be self-evident what you're going to do with it. I mean, the first time you may guess, but then you know, okay, this is going to take me to something where I can read more detail about that.
I'm agreeing with you 3 times in a row, Mark. Thank you. That's perfect. Dini, do you agree? Just metadata is good? Now that we don't have about.
No, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. So you would prefer manage?
I don't want to argue. I don't want to argue. Just leave it there.
No, but Dini, these are the important things to argue. This is really important. So please, what you prefer manage metadata?
I do, because if I'm a user, I mean, this is COIC, right? Clear only if known. We know when we get there, we can edit it. But if I land there and I don't know anything about this environment for the first time, especially, or the first few times, I'm seeing metadata. It's like, oh, here's all the metadata, and it appears, and I don't know automatically that I can do something with it. So manage tells me that I have control over that object, over that menu item.
Yeah.
And we're also using, can I also mention something else? We're using verbs: open, outline, manage, pin, hide. So from a technical communication perspective, what I'd like to do with this document, once we agree to everything, is actually go back through and clean this up like a technically written document, right? With all the consistency, all of the language, so that we parallel verbs.
So how about this then? Okay, everybody, look at the screen. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Manage.
Okay.
We don't need the word metadata, honestly, do we?
No, because I mean, if you're having very generic things anyway, that you might be managing a document, you might be managing some other element in your space. So if it's like that, that would seem fine. The other thing to bear in mind is if we want to have, we have talked about the possibility of thinking in terms of a tutorial mode, in the sense that you might have more fulsome labels on things, which you could do. So I don't think we have to be too dogmatic in our choices at this point.
Agree. Okay, so you get to the point that the system says, please choose open. So you now have the paper in front of you. You have several options how to interact with it. So Andrew, this would be exactly the kind of open you have now, I think. Right, so everything before was the library reading room thing. Logically, please stop me if I'm making nonsense here. So once you have the document in front of you, all I've done for the sake of initial simplicity is copy what I have in Reader, which is of course lacking. This is an XR space, but it's somewhere to start from. So if you select text, and it's worth mentioning, if we have voice thing here, let's say you want to look up a word on the screen, you don't have to select it. You just speak, look up, and you say the word. So this is an example, because selecting an XR is hard. This is an example where voice might be very useful. So then we can have options for dealing with an AI, doing semantic annotations. This is what we're now experimenting with in Reader. Doing find either in the document or online, copy, lifting a section so you can have it as a snippet in the corner of the room. And then this doesn't even have a proper name yet, but the idea here is if our WebXR understands the table in front of you, you can choose to place the document on the virtual document on the physical table, so you can lean on it to read it, for instance. All of these are experimental things. And also, if you have ideas for how to do this, tell me, we'll put it in, or if you have things we should add, please also say. So these are basic things. Okay, and then we are skipping to whole document interactions. And what we're talking about is some notion of having toolbar, maybe at the bottom of the document, where you can toggle between asking AI to do things that are to do with the whole document, copy the document as a citation, and then you have view options where you see as an outline, or an outline with citations, or an outline with names, or all these things. Then you can, of course, add a note, which is crucial. And you have this thing we call lift all, which takes all the text into a reading mode, meaning it's like HTML. It's free-flowing text, if it wasn't already. And of course, settings to manage that.
Copy to cite. Copy citation seems more descriptive of what you're doing. Copy to implies you're going to have to do something else before you get your citation.
I agree. So copy citation.
Okay, I'm not sure, because so this is what I have in Reader now, because the idea is copy to cite the document. That's what I had, the whole sentence. Copy citation, there are citations in the document. That's what I'm concerned with. Like, I can't copy that citation.
Well, if you're worried about scope, just say cite document, because that's the document.
But you're not citing it because you haven't pasted the citation yet.
No, because the thing you just showed us was you're looking at a whole document, and you want to cite the document that you were looking at.
But that doesn't provide the information to the user that what you've done is put that information on the clipboard. The user may say, okay, I cite a document, nothing happened. That's my concern with that.
I'm not sure I would see that confusion. I don't think.
Well, the thing is, if you're in an all-encompassing XR environment, it's a bit different, right? Because you can't easily command tab to author, for instance. I mean, we're not going to be able to implement this probably now anyway for September. But okay, so copy to cite document.
Well, I would just say cite document. You're asking for a you're asking for a citation of the document. You want to cite the document you're looking at.
Yes, but
I would expect that if that happened, that it would generate information for you about that citation. I mean, because think about it, what else would it do? Nothing. So the obvious thing is it's going to have that citation, which you can then do something with, and almost a universal behavior as stuff gets put on the clipboard.
Well,
even if you're going to do something else with it. So
can we say copy to clipboard? Can we say copy to clipboard?
Copy citation to clipboard?
Copy to clipboard.
No, but that's just copy. What are you copying?
Whatever you highlight.
No, but this is when it's not highlighted. This is for the whole document. Because if you select text, then you have copy as text or copy quote. And when you paste a quote, depending on where you paste it, has different behaviors. If you paste it in a neutral piece of software that we don't control, it appears with quotes around it and as well as citation as we can. I don't think this is quite visual meta specific. I don't think we can do these things now. So I'm just going to put question mark after this one for now. Yeah, for the language. Peter?
You mute.
You're still muted, Peter. Peter, you
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was still muted.
worry.
Do we have some sort of affordance within the environment that would let us create a named list? So a box, type a name to be associated with the box, and then drag 5 or 6 papers or citations from inside papers into that box, and then deal with the box as a whole.
I don't think we do, but we have here manage metadata. I think this is where we might write something or click something to add that information that would allow you to have such a virtual collection. But I do think it's a very important topic, Peter, that we need the means through which the user not only spatially arranges these documents, but can also file them away, so to speak.
Well,
Exactly.
this fits within the metaphor of bindings, doesn't it, that we've discussed in the past? Because what you're essentially, I mean, another way of looking at your list is an ad hoc binding of n elements to which you, the user, attribute some significance. So, that I'm just abstracting the pattern out. But yes, and the binding contains a list because it has to know what the contents of the binding are.
Maybe Andrew could speak to that. How hard would it be to give us a box that we could throw papers in and attach a name to it and then move that box around as an entity? And ideally stick the box on the clipboard or paste in a box that someone else gave us over a clipboard.
So the pasting with a clipboard is completely out of scope for what I currently have. Maybe later down the line. I feel like that's like far stretch goals. Putting stuff in a box and moving it, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Okay. By the way, because of that comment added here for your delectation, when you are looking at the document itself, between outline and manage, annotate. So you annotate the whole document through some means. Obviously, it shouldn't just be a boring text box, but some means where you can say whether it's interesting or not. Yeah, I see a few nodding heads, so that's cool.
Just
Right.
quickly for Andrew, so I understand, because it's really useful to know that about sort of clipboard things. Is this essentially because there isn't a clipboard within the environment, or the fact that if you need to interact with effectively the host computer server, whatever, of the environment, you've got to deal with all sorts of sandbox and security issues because you're moving unknown data around? Is that
I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. If we want to just copy stuff inside the space and nothing leaves the space, then yeah, I can do that. Obviously, we know that clipboard copying through software works as well, but it starts to get a lot more complicated, and what I've currently built is not sort of set up for that. If people decide that that is actually high priority, that's what we care about now. I can switch focus and start working on that, and I could probably get it working. I just figure listening to this, it sounds like some of the other core functionality is more important. So I was just kind of prioritizing stuff.
Yeah,
I think you're right. And since lots of these things are nice to have, and we can't engineer them all at once, I think it's easy to explain to people anyway. If you say, well, it's not that it can't be done, but there's a body of work that has to be done to make it just work, and sort of park it at that. Because I think a reasonable person will understand that there are some things that are imagined impossible, but they're just not possible in the instant at the moment.
Peter, briefly, we're down to the last 10 minutes.
Maybe we could just put in a couple of grayed out menu items as placeholders for that kind of functionality so that someone looking at the demo will see that we have plans to add that sort of thing down the road, even though it isn't there yet.
How would you define that sort of thing as a menu item?
Maybe an import export submenu.
Okay, okay. Let's look at that outside of the core then. So, while looking at the whole document, you have toolbar, map, and outline at the bottom of the document, at least in this basic thing. The toolbar itself gives you these things we've just gone through, and then I'm going to skip ahead to go back. We have outline. And the outline, and this is what I'm experimenting with myself, it'll either just show the headings, or headings and all annotations, or headings with only specific annotations, headings and all names or color keywords. You should be able to instantly click around on those. Andrew, I'll talk to you if we're doing this more specifically, and I'll probably show in Reader how it works in. Now, the map thing, or whatever it will be called, we really do need a better name. In this visualization of it, fits in the same size as the document, or maybe slightly larger, but it's not by default room scale. And it behaves very much like the map we have here in Author. You move things around, and you have inside that a toolbar to show, hide elements and layouts, just like we had in the library level. But now it's one document, one small thing. The reason it's framed is that so that you should be able to have many maps around the room for different documents to compare them. We should probably also have a mechanism whereby they can overlap should you want to, or to be combined should you want to. But I think that's a little advanced for now. Not just in terms of Andrew's massive workload, but also in terms of how we interact with these things. So if you guys are okay with it, we'll let Andrew focus on the map as he's doing it now, play with it, and then see how these assumptions fit, right? Because I'm very happy thinking loosely, but at this point, I think this particular thing, pause, wait for Andrew's reality, see what we do. Fair enough.
If I could give a
Please,
quick
please,
sort of
please.
elaboration on the map bit. From what I understand, the map is it's going to display all of the tags, all the names, and all the titles, which is, really cool visually, but also it's very cluttered. If we want that always visible, I know you can hide them individually, but I guess default display, would you want all of the tags and names and stuff from each document to load in with that document? So it kind of like adds a bunch of floating elements around the document every time you load one in. I'm trying to picture how you visualize this because as I mentioned before, I was pretty sure it was going to get laggy, and I have since loaded in all the texts, all the tags and stuff as a test, and man, it kills frame rate. It's rough to work in there. So having that always visible is going to just kind of make the whole experience kind of not usable. You can do stuff in it, but it's not nice.
Also, my experience of these sort of maps is less is always more, but for the user, not even from the technical implementation. The more stuff you actually stick in there is another thing you have to process to work out this. So having stuff that you don't need that you know about, which doesn't need to be there, because you can know about something you don't see. This is why, I certainly would generally want a map to open literally empty, where you'd open it, you basically you take an object or a binding of interest, put it into the map space, and then you would begin to work on the map from that. Now, if you had, as we've already discussed, you might personally have a set of metadata that might be about keywords, or it might be keyworded people or something that you might choose to add to it. And if we get, and as the design progresses, I would see that could be a case where if you opened a map that was effectively a workspace, then you could inform the workspace that your workspace would always open with certain things shown. But as a general sort of underlying base object, I would imagine that basically what you have in the map is only the information objects you've sent to it. So in other words, you open something into a map. And it might just be a document, it might be a number of documents, it might be some other object that isn't a document that you've chosen to open in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
So
okay, so kind of just to unravel that for me in the way that it's unclear to you, because I'll try and express it better.
It's not that it's unclear, it's that it's like intentionally vague because it can do a lot of things.
Yep.
So it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, that I can develop that right away.
Yeah, no, I understand. So, but I think the first thing to develop is just being able to probably take something that isn't in a map, so it's in one of our initial selection things, and put that into a map space, and then circle back around to do all the other giggles around the side. Because the fundamental thing that you need at outset is to put the object in the map space.
When you say putting the object in the map space, are you talking about every element of a single document?
I believe not, because this is one of the things that sort of in a sense that going to have to think and work on is how we represent the document, in essence, the internal link structure, how the parts of the document are linked together, because you're absolutely right. So you've got a document that obviously contains parts. Now, you might want to decompose that document, but you might sort of, for example, you might just say, well, which of my interesting keywords does it relate to? And if that's the case, I just want the document object there. And I want other objects around it. So the point of the map's the strongest when it's malleable. And I totally take your point about overloading it. But if we think in terms of pulling elements into it, maybe that's an abstraction that to start from. So
Okay.
you've got a display space, you're going to put objects into it.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
This is sorry, we're really running out of time. So this is what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. What are the things on the map? That's the question we've been asking. So now we have made it more complex today, but we understand it better. There is a map in the library view where some of the things are documents and there's stuff around it. That's one map. The other map is when you're looking at one document, and these things can be keywords in the document that the document has said is important in the metadata, or they can be keywords that you yourself have said, I care about this, I want to see if they're in the document. So this is where we need to talk about the management of these things. Most documents will not have any keywords unless our system has assigned it to them or analyzed them, so to speak, right? So I think what we should do is let Andrew get on with it, with the suggestion from us that we would like really easily to be able to do both approaches. One is open a map and there's literally nothing there. You have to use an interaction to add elements. The other one is toggle everything on and then remove things. Because in this case, Mark, conceptually, I agree with you, but considering that you are opening a map of unknown stuff, it might be useful to see what the availabilities are. So in other words, Andrew, my advice and request is just to do what the heck you want at this point, because now we need to learn from the real interaction rather than try to say what they should be.
And Andrew, I'm until the end of next week, and the sort of Hypertext deadline's passed. I'm a bit snowed, but after that, I'd be very happy to spend some time directly at a time sort of convenient to you, and have some conversation and use Tinderbox maps as a good way to explore this.
It would be good, Mark,
Peter's nodding, because I think it will give you a fresh perspective.
If you give us a session, if you give us a session next Wednesday, Mark, on Tinderbox, that would be very useful.
Okay, yeah, I can do, yeah.
So in closing then, because we have less than a minute left, is augmented documents. I don't know what we're going to call them, exploded documents, 3D, pop-up book, whatever. What is that, right? How is that stored, the knowledge of how it should unfold? Should we think of that as a workspace per document? Maybe that's what it is. These are things we now need to start thinking about, because, yeah, we started shaping. 50 messages, great, guys. Do you expect me to read them? Okay. Any further comments, questions for today?
I have to run, but this was very enlightening, having a more of a detailed explanation of how you envision this project actually shaping out. So I'll do my best. It's a lot of plan adjustments, but we can get to it. It might just be a while.
You have been extremely good at doing your best. I think you should forget almost everything you saw today. Focus on the map as you think it should be now, because it's much better for us to have a map and then we can say, no, no, no. And that is part of the record of the work we've done. So then we can say, we're choosing this, we're not choosing this. So don't worry about any of these things. This is for the general discussion that you're a part of, but you don't pivot on anything. Okay.
Okay. Never had a clear plan on what the map would look like anyways, so it's okay. I'm making it in its own space right now because it's easier to test. So I'll do that. I'll get the demo out so we can test it, and then we'll decide if we want to integrate it or how we want to have it show up, because it does feel out of place.
Even if we
At
have
the
a
moment.
map that is out of place and it's a separate thing, it's worthwhile for the project. We're very grateful. Have a wonderful weekend. Wish you were here.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, bye guys. And you, Mark, have a medium weekend with us.
Yeah, I'll catch up on my travel plans and stuff in due course, I guess, directly. So
Look
yeah,
forward.
thanks.
Okay, see you, Peter. See you, Mark. Bye.
Bye-bye.